1. Barefoot Bedouin shepherds competing in building tall buildings. According to Islamic tradition, one of the minor signs of the Day of Judgment is that barefoot, destitute Bedouin shepherds will compete in constructing tall buildings. This prophecy appears in the famous Hadith of Gabriel, recorded in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet Muhammad described signs of the end times. Historically, Bedouins were nomadic Arab tribes living in desert tents, herding camels and sheep with minimal material wealth. The transformation began in the 20th century with the discovery of oil in the Arabian Peninsula, particularly in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Today, these once poor regions boast some of the world's tallest structures. Dubai's Burj Khalifa stands at 828 meters, completed in 2010, while Mecca's clock tower reaches 601 meters. The Kingdom Tower in Jeddah is planned to exceed 1,000 meters. Many Islamic scholars point to this dramatic shift from traditional Bedouin life to modern skyscraper competition as a fulfillment of this prophecy, marking the approaching end times. 2. Loss of trust and honesty. In Islamic eschatology, the widespread loss of trust and honesty represents a fundamental sign of societal collapse before the Day of Judgment. The Prophet Muhammad warned in Sahih Bukhari that when amana, or trust, is lost, people should expect the hour. He described a time when authority would be given to those undeserving of it, when promises would be broken freely, and when betrayal in business and relationships would become normalized. This isn't a single catastrophic event, but a gradual moral erosion affecting all levels of society, from personal interactions to governmental leadership. The Hadith emphasizes betrayal of trust in guardianship, trade, testimony, and covenant. Classical scholars like Imam an-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani interpreted this as the breakdown of the very foundation that holds communities together. When people can no longer rely on each other's word, when contracts mean nothing, and when corruption pervades leadership, Islamic tradition teaches that this moral decay signals the approaching end. Modern observers point to increasing corruption, dishonest business practices, and broken promises at all societal levels as evidence of this prophecy's fulfillment. 3. Increase in killing and bloodshed. Islamic tradition warns that widespread killing and bloodshed, known as al-Harj, will increase dramatically as the Day of Judgment approaches. This sign appears in both Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet Muhammad described days when killing becomes so common that neither the murderer knows why he killed, nor the victim knows why he was killed. This prophecy encompasses both organized warfare and random violence, suggesting a world where human life loses its sanctity and violence becomes normalized. The 20th and 21st centuries witnessed unprecedented bloodshed through 2 world wars, claiming over 75 million lives, genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, and Bosnia, and ongoing regional conflicts across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Beyond warfare, modern societies face mass shootings, terrorism, and violent crime at levels previously unimaginable. The Hadith's description of senseless killing, where perpetrators and victims alike don't understand the reason for violence, resonates with contemporary acts of random terrorism and mass violence. Islamic scholars interpret this not merely as war, which has always existed, but as a specific quality of chaos and moral numbness where killing becomes commonplace and its horror no longer shocks society. 4. Time passing quickly. Islamic tradition describes a phenomenon where time itself appears to accelerate as the Day of Judgment approaches. Hadiths recorded in Musnad Ahmad and other collections mention the Prophet Muhammad saying that time will pass rapidly, with a year feeling like a month like a week, and a week like a single day. Scholars have debated whether this refers to a literal physical change in time or a perceptual experience of life's pace quickening. Some classical commentators suggested it means baraka, or blessing, will be removed from time, making people feel they accomplish less despite the same hours available. Modern interpreters point to the acceleration of contemporary life, the 24-hour news cycle, instant communication through the internet, and the constant stimulation of digital devices as potential fulfillments of this prophecy. Historical agricultural societies operated on seasonal rhythms with natural time markers, while modern industrial and information age societies demand constant productivity and rapid response. However, it's important to note that some scholars consider certain versions of this hadith weak in authenticity, and interpretations vary widely regarding whether this sign has been fulfilled or remains future. 5. Spread of adultery and fornication. According to Islamic eschatology, one of the clearer signs of the approaching Day of Judgment is the widespread prevalence of adultery and fornication, becoming so normalized that these acts are committed openly without shame. This prophecy appears in Sahih Bukhari and other authentic hadith collections, where the Prophet Muhammad warned that sexual immorality outside marriage would not only increase, but become publicly accepted rather than hidden. Islamic law strictly prohibits sexual relationships outside of marriage, viewing them as major sins that damage family structures and societal moral foundations. Historically, most cultures maintained strong taboos against such behavior, even if violations occurred privately. The 20th and 21st centuries witnessed significant shifts in sexual norms across many societies, with changing attitudes toward relationships, cohabitation before marriage, and public displays that would have been unthinkable in previous eras. Media, entertainment, and cultural movements have contributed to normalizing what Islamic tradition considers immoral. Scholars point to these cultural shifts as fulfillment of this prophecy, noting that the distinctive element isn't merely that these sins occur, but that they're practiced openly and accepted socially without stigma, indicating a fundamental erosion of moral boundaries that once governed human behavior. 6th, widespread consumption of alcohol. Islamic tradition warns that the consumption of intoxicants will become widespread, with people drinking alcohol and calling it by different names to justify their actions. This sign appears in Sunan ibn Majah and Musnad Ahmad, where the Prophet Muhammad predicted that despite the clear prohibition in Islam, people would consume wine and use euphemistic names to make it socially acceptable. Alcohol is explicitly forbidden in the Quran and considered one of the major sins in Islam. Yet the prophecy indicates a time when even Muslims would participate in its consumption while finding ways to rationalize the behavior through linguistic manipulation. The modern alcohol industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually, with widespread social acceptance in most parts of the world. Terms like spirits, social drinking, and moderate consumption soften the perception of intoxicant use, while marketing presents alcohol as sophisticated or necessary for celebration. Even in some Muslim-majority countries, alcohol remains accessible despite religious prohibitions. The prophecy's emphasis on renaming suggests not just consumption, but a cultural reframing that removes the stigma and guilt associated with violating Islamic law, indicating a deeper moral compromise where forbidden acts become normalized through clever wordplay and social pressure rather than outright rejection of religious teachings. 7. Prevalence of musical instruments. According to hadiths in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet Muhammad warned that people will make lawful the use of musical instruments as a sign of approaching end times. This remains one of the most debated signs among Islamic scholars, as there's significant disagreement about the permissibility of music in Islam. Some scholars interpret certain instruments and contexts as forbidden, while others permit music depending on its content and purpose. The hadith appears alongside other moral signs like adultery and alcohol consumption, suggesting a broader pattern of making prohibited things acceptable. The global music industry today generates hundreds of billions of dollars annually, with streaming platforms providing instant access to virtually unlimited music at all times. Historically, music was limited to live performances and special occasions, but modern technology has made it ubiquitous through smartphones, headphones, radio, television, and public spaces. The prophecy's emphasis on making it lawful suggests not just prevalence, but a theological justification for what some scholars consider prohibited. However, it's crucial to note that Islamic jurisprudence contains diverse opinions on this matter, with some schools of thought permitting certain types of music and instruments, while others maintain stricter prohibitions, making this particular sign's interpretation complex and contentious among scholars. 8. Appearance of women dressed yet naked. Islamic tradition includes a prophecy about women who will be clothed yet appear naked, described in Sahih Muslim as one of the signs preceding the Day of Judgment. The Prophet Muhammad used this seemingly paradoxical phrase to describe women wearing garments that don't properly cover their bodies, according to Islamic modesty standards. The Hadith specifies that these women will have heads like the humps of camels, which some scholars interpret as referring to elaborate hairstyles piled high on the head. Islamic teachings prescribe modest dress for both men and women, with specific requirements for covering that vary among different scholarly interpretations. The 20th and 21st centuries witnessed dramatic changes in fashion, with the introduction of transparent fabrics, form-fitting clothing, and revealing styles that technically constitute clothing, but don't fulfill the Islamic definition of modest covering. See-through materials, tight garments that outline the body's shape, and short or exposing cuts have become mainstream in many societies, including some Muslim-majority regions. Many contemporary Islamic scholars point to modern fashion trends as fulfilling this specific prophecy, noting that the distinctive element isn't nudity itself, but rather the wearing of clothes that fail their fundamental purpose of concealment, representing an erosion of modesty standards that Islamic tradition considers essential. 9. Increase in literacy and decrease in religious knowledge. Islamic eschatology describes a paradoxical situation where general literacy and worldly education increase, while religious knowledge simultaneously decreases. This sign appears in Sahih Bukhari and other collections, where the Prophet Muhammad warned that knowledge would be taken away, not by erasing it from people's minds, but through the death of scholars, leaving ignorant people to give religious opinions without proper qualification. The Hadith emphasizes that people will seek religious guidance from those who lack authentic knowledge, leading to both questioners and answerers going astray. In the modern era, universal education has spread literacy to unprecedented levels, and the internet provides instant access to vast amounts of information on virtually any subject. However, Islamic scholars express concern that despite this access, fundamental religious literacy has declined among Muslims, with many unable to read Quran with understanding, unaware of basic Islamic jurisprudence, and confused about essential beliefs. Social media and online platforms allow anyone to present themselves as religious authorities without traditional scholarly credentials, chain of authentic transmission, or years of study under qualified teachers. This democratization of religious discourse, while providing wider access, has also created confusion as contradictory and sometimes incorrect information spreads rapidly, fulfilling the prophecy of knowledge disappearing through the absence of properly qualified scholars. 10. Men obey their wives and disobey their mothers. According to hadiths in Sunan ibn Majah and Jamia Tirmidhi, one sign of the approaching Day of Judgment is that men will obey their wives while disobeying their mothers, representing an inversion of the family hierarchy emphasized in Islamic teachings. Islam places tremendous importance on honoring parents, particularly mothers, with a famous hadith stating that paradise lies beneath the feet of mothers. The Quran commands respect and kindness toward parents multiple times, making disobedience to them a serious sin. However, this prophecy describes a time when the immediate nuclear family relationship takes precedence over the extended family structure, with a man prioritizing his wife's demands over his mother's rights. Modern societal shifts toward nuclear family units, geographic separation from parents, and changing family dynamics have altered traditional structures where multiple generations live together or nearby. The prophecy doesn't suggest that loving one's wife is wrong, but rather points to a problematic imbalance where a man abandons his Islamic duty toward his mother in favor of his wife's wishes, even when those wishes contradict what's right. Contemporary patterns of elderly parents being neglected, placed in care facilities, or having minimal contact with their children while couples focus exclusively on their immediate households are interpreted by some scholars as manifestations of this prophesied family breakdown. 11. The Mahdi's appearance. The Islamic tradition teaches that the Mahdi, a guided leader from the Prophet Muhammad's lineage through his daughter Fatima, will appear during a time of great turmoil and oppression as the first of the major signs of the Day of Judgment. Hadiths in Sunan Abu Dawud, Jami at-Tirmidhi, and Sunan ibn Majah describe a man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah, who will reluctantly accept leadership and fill the earth with justice after it has been filled with tyranny. According to these narrations, the Mahdi will have a broad forehead and a hooked nose, and people will give him allegiance between the Rukn and Maqam near the Kaaba in Mecca. He will rule for 7, 8, or 9 years, according to different hadith versions, establishing Islamic governance and preparing the way for the subsequent trials involving the Dajjal and the return of Prophet Jesus. It's important to note that while these hadiths are widely accepted in Sunni Islam, scholars debate the authenticity grading of some narrations, and interpretations differ significantly between Sunni and Shia traditions. The Mahdi's appearance represents hope for Muslims during the darkest period of human history, promising that divine justice will prevail before the final tribulations, though the exact timing and circumstances remain known only to Allah. 12. The Dajjal. The Dajjal, meaning the deceiver or false messiah, represents the greatest trial humanity will face before the Day of Judgment, described extensively in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari. According to Islamic tradition, he will be a one-eyed man, blind in his right eye, with the Arabic word kafir, meaning disbeliever, written on his forehead in letters that every believer will be able to read regardless of literacy. The Prophet Muhammad described him as having a massive physique, reddish complexion, and curly hair. He will emerge from somewhere between Syria and Iraq according to some narrations, claiming first to be a prophet and then to be divine itself. The Dajjal will perform false miracles, including commanding the sky to rain, the earth to produce vegetation, and even appearing to resurrect the dead, deceiving vast numbers of people. His trial will last 40 days, with the first day like a year, the second like a month, the third like a week, and the remaining days of normal length. He will travel the entire earth except for Mecca and Medina, which will be protected by angels. According to Hadith, he will be followed by 70,000 Jews of Isfahan and many others who are deceived by his false displays of power. 13th Return of Jesus. According to Islamic tradition recorded in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, Prophet Jesus, son of Mary, will descend from heaven as one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment, appearing at the white minaret in the eastern part of Damascus, Syria. The hadiths describe him descending with his hands resting on the wings of 2 angels, wearing 2 yellow garments, and appearing as a man of medium height, with reddish-white complexion and lank hair. Unlike Christian eschatology, where Jesus returns as divine, Islamic tradition teaches he will come as a prophet and follower of Prophet Muhammad's law, ruling according to Islamic teachings. His primary mission will be to kill the Dajjal, which according to Hadith will occur at the Gate of Lud, identified as modern-day Lod in Israel. After defeating the Dajjal, Jesus will break crosses, kill swine, and abolish the jizya tax, symbolically uniting Christianity and Islam under pure monotheism. Various narrations state he will rule for 40 years, though some mention 7, during which time he will marry, have children, and establish a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. Animals will lose their hostility toward each other, and the earth will produce abundant blessings during his righteous reign before the final trials. 14. Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog, known in Arabic as Ya'juj and Ma'juj, are two massive nations or tribes mentioned in both the Quran and authentic hadiths as one of the major signs preceding the Day of Judgment. According to Surah Al-Kahf in the Quran, a righteous king known as Dhul-Qarnayn, often identified with Alexander the Great, constructed a barrier of iron and molten copper to contain these destructive peoples after communities complained of their corruption. Islamic tradition teaches that after Prophet Jesus kills the Dajjal, a small opening will appear in this barrier, which will eventually break completely, releasing Gog and Magog in overwhelming numbers. The Hadiths in Sahih Muslim describe them passing by the Lake of Tiberias, known as the Sea of Galilee, and drinking it completely dry. They will fire arrows toward the sky, claiming to have conquered earth and challenging heaven itself. According to the narrations, Jesus and the remaining believers will take refuge on Mount Tur while Gog and Magog overrun the earth. Their destruction will come not through human effort, but through divine intervention, as Allah will send a type of worm or insect that kills them overnight. Their corpses will create such a stench that birds will be sent to carry the bodies away, cleansing the earth for the final era. 15. The Beast of the Earth. Islamic eschatology describes the emergence of a creature called Dabat al-Ard, or the Beast of the Earth, mentioned in Surah An-Naml of the Quran, which states that when the word comes to pass against people, a beast will emerge from the earth speaking to them that mankind had no certainty in divine signs. According to various hadiths and classical tafsir interpretations, this beast will appear when people have completely abandoned faith and will mark humanity on their foreheads, distinguishing believers from disbelievers. The descriptions of the beast vary significantly across different narrations, with some suggesting it will be a composite creature of enormous size, while others provide different details. Classical scholars mention it will carry the staff of Prophet Moses and the seal of Prophet Solomon, using these to mark people. The mark on believers will say, "This is a believer," while disbelievers will be marked accordingly. Some narrations suggest the beast will emerge from Mecca, specifically near Mount Safa, though other locations are also mentioned in different sources. The appearance of this beast represents a critical moment when the door of repentance closes, meaning that after witnessing this undeniable miraculous sign, faith will no longer be accepted from those who did not believe before, as belief forced by clear proof loses its spiritual merit. 16. The sun rising from the west. According to authentic hadiths in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment is that the sun will rise from the west instead of the east, representing a complete reversal of the natural order established since creation. The Prophet Muhammad stated that the hour will not come until the sun rises from its setting place, and when people witness this undeniable miracle, everyone will believe, but this faith will no longer be accepted. The Quran in Surah Al-An'am, verse 158, supports this concept by stating that on the day certain signs come, belief will not benefit a soul that had not believed before or earned good through their faith. This cosmic reversal will happen suddenly one morning, marking the permanent closure of the door of repentance, as faith compelled by undeniable physical proof loses its spiritual value compared to faith based on conviction and submission to the unseen. Scholars debate the exact sequence of this sign relative to others, with some placing it before the appearance of the beast, while others position it afterward. The astronomical impossibility of such an event under natural laws confirms its miraculous nature, demonstrating Allah's absolute power over creation and signaling that the Earth's final days have begun as the natural world collapses in preparation for the end. 17. 3 major landslides. Islamic tradition describes 3 catastrophic landslides or earthquakes as major signs of the approaching Day of Judgment, mentioned in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet Muhammad stated there would be 3 landslides, one in the east, one in the west, and one in the Arabian Peninsula. These are not ordinary earthquakes, but massive land-swallowing events of unprecedented scale and devastation, representing a fundamental destabilization of the Earth's structure itself. The Hadith provides limited detail about these events, leaving the exact locations within these broad regions unspecified, and the timing relative to other major signs somewhat unclear. Classical and contemporary scholars agree that no historical earthquakes, regardless of their severity, fulfill this particular prophecy, as these three landslides represent future catastrophic events distinct from normal seismic activity. The brevity of the Hadith has led to various interpretations about what these landslides will entail, but the consensus holds that they will involve portions of land literally opening and swallowing everything above them, causing massive casualties and demonstrating the approaching end of worldly life. These geological catastrophes, along with the other cosmic and earthly disturbances described in Islamic eschatology, paint a picture of creation itself beginning to unravel as the Day of Judgment draws near, with the very ground beneath humanity's feet becoming unstable and hostile. 18. Smoke covering the earth. According to Islamic tradition, thick smoke will envelop the entire earth as one of the major signs before the Day of Judgment, mentioned explicitly in the Quran in Surah Ad-Dukhan, verses 10 through 16, which instructs people to wait for the day when the sky brings forth visible smoke that will envelop humanity, causing a painful punishment. Authentic hadiths elaborate that this smoke will last for 40 days according to some narrations, entering people's ears and causing symptoms similar to a severe cold or flu, with believers experiencing less suffering than disbelievers. The afflicted will cry out for relief from this torment, though the smoke will persist for its appointed duration. Some classical scholars, including the companion Ibn Mas'ud, debated whether this prophecy was fulfilled during a severe drought in Mecca during the Prophet's lifetime, when people's hunger was so extreme they saw mirages resembling smoke. But the majority of scholars maintain that this sign remains in the future, as a literal global phenomenon. The smoke represents an atmospheric catastrophe from which no location on Earth will escape, demonstrating that even the sky itself turns hostile during the final tribulations. This sign, like others in Islamic eschatology, emphasizes the complete breakdown of the natural world's normal functioning, as creation moves toward its appointed end, with the very air becoming a source of suffering, rather than life. 19. The fire that drives people to gathering. According to authentic hadiths in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, a massive fire will emerge from Yemen, specifically from the direction of Aden, serving as the final major sign before the Day of Judgment itself. This fire will drive all remaining people on earth toward the land of gathering, identified in the hadiths as Sham, the region of the Levant, including modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan. Unlike typical fires that move quickly and unpredictably, the narrations describe this fire as traveling at a measured pace, stopping where people stop to rest at night and pausing where they rest during midday, essentially herding humanity like a shepherd guides his flock. Sahih Bukhari specifically states that the fire will gather people, accompanying them on their final journey, ensuring that no one escapes this ultimate migration. This fire represents the transition from worldly life to the gathering for judgment, as it drives every living person toward the appointed location where the hour will strike. After this fire completes its task of assembling humanity, the sequence of signs concludes, and the Day of Judgment itself arrives with the blowing of the trumpet. The imagery of fire emerging from the southern Arabian Peninsula and driving people northward emphasizes the inescapable nature of this final gathering, as all of humanity is compelled to move toward their ultimate destination and accounting. 20. The blowing of the trumpet. The blowing of the trumpet, known as the Sur, marks the actual arrival of the Day of Judgment itself, rather than merely a sign preceding it, representing the transition from worldly existence to eternal life. According to Islamic tradition, Based on numerous Quranic verses and hadiths, the angel Israfil will blow into a massive trumpet, producing a sound that initiates the end of creation as we know it. The Quran in Surah Az-Zumar, verse 68, describes two distinct blows of this trumpet. The first blow causes everything in the heavens and earth to swoon and die, with all living creatures perishing, except those whom Allah specifically wills to survive, though eventually even the surviving angels die. After a period known only to Allah, the second blow resurrects all of creation for the final judgment and accounting. During this resurrection, the earth will be transformed completely. Mountains will crumble to dust, the sky will be torn apart, and graves will split open as every human who ever lived stands before their Creator. Records of deeds will be opened, scales will be set to weigh actions, and the bridge over hell will be established. This moment represents the ultimate transition from temporary worldly life to permanent eternal existence, where every soul receives absolute justice and is assigned to either paradise or hell based on their faith and deeds. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.